What's up, guys? We are back with another ThunderCats review from Super7, taking a look at the big bad when it comes to, well, the entirety of ThunderCats, really. We are taking a look at MUMM-RA. So this is Mummy MUMM-RA, not the ever-living MUMM-RA. We'll get him later. So we've got this guy here in our brown mailer box that is the hallmark for the Ultimates line right now. ThunderCats logo and MUMM-RA's name there on the front. We can pop this guy open. And then, of course, we've got our fancy slipcover on the inside, and I really can't stress enough in every one of these reviews how much I like this design. Something about it really does it for me. And one of the differences between figures in this line is that we've got MUMM-RA's insignia here instead of the ThunderCats logo on the villain boxes. So you've got the twin snakes with that nice red foil, and then the ThunderCats logo down there on the bottom, and of course on the back. Pop that slipcover off, and we have got our little mummy man there inside that big window with a ton of accessories, and then of course a new cloth cape to look at. ThunderCats logo down there on the bottom, and then that same iconic vintage artwork that we saw with Lino on the back, and a little bit of a write-up for MUMM-RA. So let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here he is out of the package, our Super7 Ultimates MUMM-RA, so our Mummy MUMM-RA. And just like the rest of this wave, this guy was provided for the purposes of review by Super7, and this was one of my favorite figures in that original wave from Mattel. This guy is more of the same stuff. He is very similar. He does have some changes. There are a few tweaks, however, and then he comes with more stuff, and he does have one of the best, I mean, I guess it's an accessory or just items in the entire line so far. So we do have some really cool stuff to talk about here. As far as, of course, moving this guy around, there are a few different ways to go about this because, well, he's very much restricted when you've got him in this little kind of closed cloak. So this is the very sequestered look where he's just sort of standing there looking old and decrepit, decayed even, and you know, he doesn't really have a lot of dynamic potential when he's trapped in this robe. You can move the arm out. It can't really go out to the side very much. You can swivel it. You, of course, got your hinged and rotating wrist there. He does have a waist twist, which you can utilize, but it doesn't really do a whole lot here. And then you've got your legs that can kick forward and they can kick backwards. And then you've got your knees, of course, which rotate. We've got rocker, and you've got hinges down at those ankles. But he does have more articulation than that, obviously. It's just that when you've got him in this particular setup with the hard plastic, well, it's not hard plastic, but the rubbery plastic robe here, he can only do so much. Granted, that's kind of the point here, but he does have more potential, and there is a way to utilize it in this particular instance. So we're going to take him out and see what the actual Mummy MUMM-RA can do here when he's not wearing his cape. So out of his robe, this guy does have a lot more movement potential, and he does come with a soft goods cape, so we do have a way to actually use all of the articulation on this figure. It's just that, again, when he's in that particular cape, it's just locked down, but that's okay. That's what it's supposed to do. The head, otherwise, can look really far up. He can't really look down too much, but he's sort of always kind of slouching down anyway, so it's sort of doing that to begin with. The head can tilt a little bit, and then you have full rotation. Arms go out at the shoulders. They are connected, but they don't really have any issues there, so this piece of plastic does connect the arms, but it's very free-flowing, no real problems. Where you might get into issues is rotating, though, because they can only go out about that far before they start to pull on each other. But he can sort of do a mummy walk if you need him to do something like that. And then they do go all the way back. So it's really just a matter of how you want to orient those arms. There is no bicep swivel on this guy, but you do have a single rotating elbow, so 90 degrees. Then we've got hinges, and you've got rotation at those wrists, of course. Waist twist again, just like I mentioned previously. Legs can go out about that far. You do have to contend with all the wraps on them, which isn't too much of a surprise. They kick forward about that far. They do kick backwards probably more than you'll need. There is no thigh cut on this guy. You've got your single knee that rotates again, and then you've got rocker, and you've got hinges down at those ankles. So he does still have pretty good movement capabilities. Again, he is the same figure that we got from Mattel previously. The only difference is that when it comes to actually posing him, he's going to be restricted when he's in that kind of closed rubbery cape. But then when you get him, you know, if you want to have him like this, or if you have him with the soft goods cape, you have a lot more freedom of movement. So it just depends on how you want to display him. Now, aesthetically speaking, again, I was already a fan of this particular figure in the Mattel days, and this is, again, more of the same. So it is the same figure, same sculpt, all that kind of stuff. All of the details are still there, but there are some changes, and one of them is actually very glaring now that I see it. He's a different color. This figure is blue. The Mattel version, and pretty much every MUMM-RA, it's kind of a greenish, I'm not even sure what color to call that. Kind of green color. I'm wondering why this guy is blue. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's to differentiate him from the Mattel figure and maybe tie him more in line with the ever-living MUMM-RA. So I'm not sure that it's exactly accurate, but I'm not against it either because it still looks really good. Like at first glance, it didn't even cross my mind. And then once I started digging in, I realized, yeah, he's not the same color anymore, but he still looks really good. The wraps on this guy are really nicely done. There is some dry brushing on it. There is, of course, a little bit of a wash, and that may seem a little different if you have the other figure to compare to, because it's hard to get washes to be exactly consistent across every single figure, and of course, years down the road to be exactly the same. So you might see it maybe a little more heavy-handed in certain areas, but otherwise, it's very, very similar. This figure, outside of the color, is very, very close to that Mattel version in terms of just overall application of detail. I really dig this cape, the cloak. This is how I've displayed my Mattel version for, I don't know, however many years. He really hasn't moved out of this particular configuration really ever. I don't think I ever used his more billowing type of cape. I really like the way it restricts the body. It just very much looks classic MUMM-RA, where he's just sort of standing around menacingly, you know, being a decrepit old man. And I really, really like the way it hangs, the way the cape kind of drapes over him, the wrinkles in it, the overall flow of it. It's nice and posable while at the same time actually kind of locking him down. So granted, it does kind of mess him up as far as articulation goes, but once you've got him like this, that's exactly what he's supposed to be doing. So I think it looks good in that robe. And then you've got, of course, tons of the wraps all over his body because he is, of course, a mummy. You've got all the ones that kind of hang down. You've got these that hang down from the face just to add a little bit more depth to the figure. And then the ones that kind of hang in the back, the ones that connect him all together. And just all of this nasty, old, sinewy flesh down here that's kind of accentuated by a little bit of a wash just to bring out some of that detail. And I really do like the way this figure looks. Again, the blue is still kind of a curiosity, but honestly, I'm not sure it bothers me, and frankly, I'm going to have both of them on the shelf, the Matty and the Super 7, so it's nice in that way, for me anyway, to be able to differentiate the two and keep them sort of separate. And that doesn't even go on to say anything about the head, because this is easily my favorite part of this figure when it comes to the base figure and just the overall construction, because this thing looks so good. The detail on it is incredibly well done. The colors are really striking. Those red sunken eyes with the black outlines in there, it really makes them pop. It's a small little detail when it comes to the eyes, but I think it really helps make things kind of just stand out a little bit more. The black kind of maw within his mouth and those jagged, nasty teeth, the dirty wraps that hang down from his face, and the fact that he's kind of cast in shadow when he's wearing this particular robe really accentuates the MUMM-RA vibe. So, I mean, this head sculpt is just as good now as it was when Mattel produced it. It's just a little bit different. Now, as far as accessories goes, like I've already mentioned, this guy does have probably the biggest, and I mean, right now it's probably the best accessory that we've gotten in this line, and quite possibly one of the biggest and most important upgrades to a figure. So the original Mattel figure had the same kind of closed plastic robe that we've already seen, but it also had one that was slightly more open and kind of used as him kind of billowing out his robe and transforming almost. This figure has a soft goods robe, and it's the same kind of situation that we had with Splinter, where it's done up by C. Jesum as far as prototyping goes, and I think that this is really, really nice. There is a lot of fabric here. It bunches up really easily to close around him, but more importantly for me, it's going to be a really nice cape if you want to have it flowing behind him, if you want to try to have him, you know, kind of gliding across the room or something, or across your display, or very likely a transformation kind of scene and diorama or setup, because I mean that's what this screams to me, is a way to have this big cape just billowing in the wind. And I mean, we can all see the scene right now where he's transforming and he's screaming his brains out and he transforms into the ever-living MUMM-RA. So my full intent right now is to throw this guy on a shelf and put the Icon Heroes statue ever-living MUMM-RA behind him to have like a kind of transformation scene. And I really, really dig this. It's very much the same shade of red as the smaller cape that we got, the plastic one. There is a wire that runs through the hood, and then there's a wire that runs around the base of his neck, and then we've also got one that runs the length of the cape all the way around, so you can get it to kind of bunch up and be a little more dynamic, have it billowing, have it you know, just look a little bit more alive. And then you can also you know, fold his arms down if you want, and it does work as a normal cape as well. There is just a lot of material, so you're gonna have to work with it, but it also bunches up really nicely around him, so it looks like it's just a cape flowing around this old blue mummy man, and I couldn't be happier with this. I was very curious to see how soft goods were going to work in this line. I was really impressed with Splinter, but this is a different thing because of it being a cloak cape situation, and I'm really happy with it. The extra head sculpt that we get here very much goes in line with kind of what I think we're supposed to be doing with this cape in many situations as far as a transformation, because, well, he does have an incantation when he transforms, so what better than to have an open mouth where it looks like he's kind of yelling or screaming. The sculpt is entirely different, of course. You've got more of those wraps hanging down, and it's more of that same good Four Horsemen sculpt work. So I'm really happy with it. Paintwork is really nice, more of that sunken red eye situation along with the black outline, which again, I really like. It makes everything pop quite well. And then we do have a bunch of other stuff. So we've got some new things and we've got some retreads as far as the Mattel figures. So we'll start with those. We've got the hilt to the sword of Plundar. And it's, you know, the dual, well, quad snakes, I suppose, if you want to go all out. And this is done up a little different because it's full gold metallic, whereas the Mattel sword was not gold metallic. Well, it's not really a sword, it's just a hilt. So you've got that. We've got my favorite accessory previously. We've got the vintage figures staff. So this, of course, is not something that is really cartoony, but it is very, very near and dear to me because I love this thing. I think it's an awesome accessory. It's really well sculpted, tons of detail on it, all those red accents as far as the horns, the eyes, the teeth. Just a gnarly piece of work here. So good stuff. I fully intend to use this many, many times when it comes to my displays because this is a quintessential MUMM-RA thing to me, whether it's really a show thing or not. And then we've got a couple extra hands. So you've got some gripping hands to, of course, use with the accessories. So he's got the two kind of style pose hands that are on him in the box, and then you've got these. And then we've got some new stuff. So we've got a reuse of the Book of Omens from Lion-O. So this is the fake Book of Omens, which is done up in a different color. Same exact sculpt, same thing, just different colorway. So if you're familiar with that one, or you saw my Lion-O review, you know what we've got going on here. So you got that. And then we've got the Thundranium urn here. And this is pretty nicely done. There's a lot of sculpt work on it. All of these little pieces are actually sculpted in the little details right here. And there's a little bit of paint rub on the back side or the front. I'm not really sure which is which, but you've got that kind of a random thing, honestly. This reminds me of Motu Classics, kind of some of the random stuff, and I really dig getting these more weird inclusions. And then the last thing we've got is the Rosencrantz medallion. So this is definitely a weird thing because this is a very relatively unimportant thing overall. I mean, it's kind of very specific to a certain episode, so it's not the most important thing, but it's an interesting accessory. I'm kind of glad they gave it to us just to have something different, and it's one of those kind of weird, random accessories that, again, reminds me of Motu Classics, reminds me about what's going on with this line and kind of where things are. So there are a lot of new things for this particular figure, some retreads, and then we've got that amazing soft goods cape with the extra head sculpt to round out a really solid package. So here they are side by side. We of course have to do our comparison, and you can see a little bit of a difference here between these two. So I didn't mention everything because I wanted to get them right next to each other. Of course, the big difference is the skin tone. Now granted, this guy also has different hands because, you know, they've changed up hands for this particular line, so that's one thing to take note of as well. But the base figure, very much the same thing, very, very similar, very familiar if you've been involved in this line before. The skin tone is different, and then of course the cape, the cloak is different. So we've got a much lighter shade of red here. And again, I actually am very happy with these changes because they're not crazy different, they're not out of the realm of possibility, and they're going to make this figure stand out from the original if you've got both. And again, you know, obviously I have both here, so it's nice to be able to have an easy way to differentiate the two, because otherwise you would just have the same exact figure, maybe with a different cape on your shelf. But I really, really do like both of these figures. This guy's not going anywhere. He's staying in my display. He's just going to get joined by a new MUMM-RA. So if you've got the original, you know what's being changed up. Otherwise, you're going to have your little slightly lighter, maybe a little bit more cartoony MUMM-RA. And then some size comparisons because, of course, MUMM-RA is definitely his own thing. He is very, very different in scale and size to the rest of this line. So here he is next to our Ultimates Lion-O and the ever-present Laughing Prince Adam. So you can see that Lion-O is very much, you know, more than a head taller than MUMM-RA, as is, of course, Adam, because they're basically the same size. And then we've got, let's do a figure art. So the Goku, and he's very similar. We've got our Power Rangers Lightning Collection, our Lost Galaxy Red. So they're all very similar, of course, not necessarily in scale with each other. We've got our Ultimates Raphael, who is basically just a hair taller than MUMM-RA there. And then for something a little more standardy, 112-ish, we'll talk about a Black Series Stormtrooper. So you can see he's a little bit taller than MUMM-RA, but none of these are truly within scale with each other. So MUMM-RA is definitely on the short side when compared to the other Ultimates figures, but he looks really good alongside him because, of course, he should be a little bit smaller. And of course, after doing the Matty comparison, we have to do a comparison to the original LJN MUMM-RA. And I mean, frankly, there's not really a lot to compare to here because, well, they are so far removed from each other. This guy really doesn't do a whole lot. He is essentially just a swiveling head and arms, and he has that awesome staff, which, again, is something that I definitely kind of carry with me as I remember ThunderCats from when I was a kid, so that's definitely a nostalgic throwback that I really like to see with this line. But they are really hard to compare. There's not a whole lot to really discuss. It's a mummy. It's also a mummy. They're just very far removed, but you can definitely see some of the influences there, especially in the color of that cloak. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff to like with this figure. I'm still interested to know what the true intent is behind the color change, honestly. You know, I don't recall noticing that until actually getting the figure in hand that, yeah, he's a lot different than I thought he was going to be. Again, it's not a huge thing for me. I still think he looks really good, and frankly, he looks really nice next to the Icon Heroes Staction figure, so it's kind of a good pairing in that regard. Otherwise, though, he has a lot of changes that are for the better, from that extra head sculpt, which I really do like. It's probably going to be my preferred one for this particular figure. The soft goods cape is out of this world. He's got some good inclusions with those extra kind of esoteric accessories, and then of course they brought back some of those older accessories with the hilt and the staff. And yeah, I mean, this just exudes classic ThunderCats to me when it comes to MUMM-RA. I mean, a little diminutive, nasty old dude covered in wraps in a bright red cape with just some gnarly expressions on his face. I'm really digging this one. I was already a fan of the Mattel figure to begin with, so this again is kind of more of that same familiar figure, but I'm really happy to get this guy, especially with these changes, because now I've got another reason to have a second one on my shelf. So that's going to do it for this look at the Super 7 Ultimates MUMM-RA. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.